Welcome to another episode of the Thunderstock Show, collection of valuable brainstorms to enhance your life, liberty, and pursuit of property. Our guest today is Curt Swindoll.
Swindoll.
Swindoll. Curt is currently in Texas, but his blood is that of California.
Yeah.
Interesting story there.
Yeah.
Curt's an EOS Implementer. He is a recovering entrepreneur. Can't wait to talk about that journey.
Yeah, it's true. That's
Without
true.
further ado, Curt, how do you figure you're a recovering entrepreneur? It's the first time I've heard that line.
Yeah, I'd never wanted to admit that I was an entrepreneur. I thought entrepreneurs are crazy. It's not me. I'm thoughtful. I don't know what I would say. I'm careful, but I'm certainly thoughtful and all of that. And I thought entrepreneurs are nuts. They're nuts. And after starting a nonprofit and two for-profit, agencies and taking the plunge, three times I've left companies not knowing where I was going. But it was like, I'm done here. I'm done here. And I walked out and okay, let's figure out what's next. And I've done it three times in my career. And so I think that probably qualifies me. Maybe somebody would say I'm a little bit nuts and all of that, but the risk of that is less concerning to me than staying in a place where I don't want to be anymore. So I think that's kind of the recovering part of it. I'm recovering my willingness to call myself an entrepreneur. How about that?
I was going to say, jumping out of a plane without a parachute three times would
Yeah.
qualify as
Yeah.
risk taking, but maybe past your threshold. And people find very commonality thing is people find that the decision to start a business is sometimes the scariest. But I've also found that sometimes the decision to leave a business that you've started is even more so a shock to the ego or the sense of self or identity. You've done it three times and you're doing pretty well as an EOS implementer now and helping others navigate that path. What was it like around the first time that you exited a business that you started and didn't know what you were going to do next? And what was it like versus the third after you had a little bit of experience?
Yeah. So some of the roles that I've exited without being sure where I was going were like C-level roles with companies that I'd been a part of. So not necessarily companies I'd started, but
Mm-hmm.
companies where I was in an executive role, but I just had a sense my time here is done. I'm done in this environment. I won't get into detail on, kind of what led up to some of that, but I just had a conviction that this isn't where I need to be going forward. This isn't where I'm going to be going forward. I need to figure out something else. And in talking with a lot of people about that experience, I find that there's a lot of folks that really aren't interested in doing that, taking that kind of plunge. But, we say in EOS that you got to create openings. And that's probably the epitome of creating the opening, that when we create openings, it is a vacuum into which all kinds of energy and attention and focus is sucked. And that energy and attention and focus helps us do things that we wouldn't do if we were trying to split our time, blend our time, those kinds of things.
You
So
can't fill a cup that's already full.
you can't. I believe wholeheartedly in burning the boats, to mix the metaphors and all of that. Yep, I would jump off that burning platform and take my chances in the rolling sea because I know where the platform is going and I don't want to go there. So
Interesting. One of the questions I have on that is, have you ever heard the phrase that you'd rather choose the devil you don't know than the one you do?
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you've been a part of five different industries in your career.
I have.
What are some of the ones that you prefer, you like more than others, and why?
Yeah. So I was in technology early on in my career and I love technology. I love the efficiency of it. I love the scale of it. I work with some technology companies. My son-in-law started and running a tech firm in California. I kind of like the pace of it. It's kind of crazy, but yeah, I think that kind of thing is interesting. So I have also been in services in offering, what's the word I'm looking for? Essentially working for a dozen clients that all feel like they own a piece of you. And that's really hard. It's really hard feeling like I've got 10 bosses and I can't please all of them because I would like to give all of them more time than I can afford to, you know. So agencies, that's what I was looking for.
Right.
So I've worked in agencies a couple of times, and I think that's some of the toughest business. We say that you make that 3 years in an agency is equal to 1 year and you know in other kinds of work, and it's just because you're exposed to so many different kinds of things. That's probably part of it that I like, being exposed to a lot of different things. Obviously, if I've been in 5 different industries, I'm curious about stuff. I want to learn different stuff. I want to grow. I want to develop. I want to challenge myself, those kinds of things. But it's hard. It is not an easy place to be.
I have a background in marketing agencies, and
There you go.
I can
There you go.
attest to that sentiment that
Yeah.
what I did brand side for 3 years versus what I did in marketing agencies for even 12 months.
Yeah.
I learned way more about business in general and
Yeah.
people and marketing specifically in 12 months.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, the experiences brand side were great. I got to get really deep in that business and got
Yeah.
to, you know, have a strong understanding of the industry. But
Yep.
I mean, marketing agency pays, you don't get gray hairs in your beard for no reason. And that's
Nope.
one of the
You
reasons.
don't. But this is well earned over. Yeah. Over. Yep, a lot of years in agency. So I had my own agency for 6, 7 years, left that, went to work for one of my clients, as you say, brand side. 3 years later, went to work for another agency here in Dallas, did that for another 6 or 7 years. So I've spent a lot of years in agency work and managing a lot of client projects and the like.
So you also have quite a bit of experience in the nonprofit sector, and it seems to be one of your grooves.
I do.
How did you get started in nonprofit, and how long have you been working with that industry?
Yeah, so my father had a nonprofit, and so I was working in that for a little while, and then when I started an agency in 2000, it was intended to do organization development work like I'm doing with EOS now, and I starved for 3 years. We tried to make that work, and then we pivoted into doing fundraising work, and what do you know? We had all kinds of work after that,
Hmm.
and did really well. The agency here in Dallas that I joined was a fundraising agency, and so I don't think I ever really got started saying I want to be in fundraising, but it kind of one thing led to another, and if you're a nonprofit, it's inevitably you're going to talk about fundraising at some point or another, and it's actually been really helpful in my EOS work. So, but yeah, it's a world unto itself.
I can imagine it would be an interesting transition from nonprofit fundraising to EOS, specifically around the accountability chart looking a little bit different. I know
Yep.
in EOS,
Yep.
the accountability chart traditionally looks like you have your visionary, you have your integrator, then you have your department heads, then the supporting roles underneath that roll up underneath.
Right. Right.
But in nonprofit, my assumption is you have your board, right? Your board of directors, you know, you people that are advisors. You may have some donors that have a lot of say in the organization.
You can. Yep. So let's distinguish a couple of things there. So using the accountability chart as an example, in a for-profit environment, we would say that there's an owner's box.
Mhm.
Who owns the business may not be people working in the business. They're going to say who runs the business because they own it, but they don't really run it. And so the owner's box sits above the visionary, above the CEO, right? And then you've got the visionary and the integrator, and then you've got the primary functions in the business. So the board doesn't sit down in there unless it's a super small organization and the board is the organization. So
Mm.
this is where you get into nuances depending on the size of the nonprofit, and any kind of a nonprofit of any size. They have staff, and those staff are not board members. But in the event you got a board member who's a staff member, now you got somebody who wears two different hats, and you better be really clear about what hat they're wearing and when. When we're talking about the accountability chart, they're wearing a staff hat and they can be fired. You ought to be willing to do that because
Open
it's
and
a
honest, tough
you
conversations.
got to be up you got to be open and honest about it. So that's kind of where the board sits. If they're wearing the board hat, then they sit in the board box and they're not a part of the leadership team meetings and things like that, right? So that's a distinction I would make. And then another distinction is when we build out the accountability chart in a for-profit environment, we talk about starting with the three kind of primary functions that are true in any business: sales and marketing, operations, and finance. How do we turn our services, our products into revenue? How do we create, develop, deploy our products and services? And how do we manage our assets? Those are the three primary functions. Well, those three functions exist in a nonprofit. Instead of sales and marketing, they might call it revenue, they might call it philanthropy, they may call it grants, they might call it, events and galas and stuff like that. They may call it the sale of products and services or fees for service. That's the challenge in a nonprofit, is that revenue comes from a host of different worlds, depending on what kind of nonprofit they are. So you got to deal with all that.
Yeah, I have a little bit of experience with nonprofits, certainly not as much as you do. And I found that the appetite that I have for newness and for never having the same day across clients. One nonprofit I served with marketing, they were in alternative to like the health marketplace. So like this was around the Obamacare times and
Okay.
things like that.
Yeah.
So talk about right solution at the right time. They really blew up during I would say 2008 was when they started, right around that changed administration. And in 2016, they grew immensely. And then another nonprofit is almost like an informational cohort. They're trying to essentially it's called Society for UAP Studies. So it's like
Okay. Okay.
it's an educational group around the phenomenon of aliens or UAPs, and they both have incredibly different models of how they get donors. Couldn't be more different, but they really have the same kind of problems. And I think a lot of it starts with getting the right people in the right seats on their board to perform functions. What are some of the differences in leadership and like how you approach leadership or in organizational change for nonprofits than to for-profits with that layer of complexity?
So I think a general principle that I take, Ross, in thinking through questions like that is I start with the basic premise that there aren't as many differences as there are similarities. People are people are people. And whether you work for a living or you are volunteering your time, you're there to do a job, and we should treat you like an employee. So we should hold you to a standard. We should have an expectation. And if you say, but I'm a volunteer, I can operate and act any way I want, I think the nonprofit should say, well, not here.
Mm.
There are lots of other nonprofits out there. You're welcome to go invest your time there. But if you're going to be here, we have some expectations of how you're going to conduct yourself and the job that you're going to do and, what that looks like and all. So I start from the premise, more similarities than differences. I think in some nonprofits there's a scarcity mindset that comes through just scarce resources and all of that.
Sure.
So that's unfortunate, but I think it's a reality of a lot of nonprofits is that it just feels like resources are super scarce and limited. So we can't pay people well and all of that. And yet I think when nonprofits operate more like their for-profit friends, they have an opportunity to attract people that their for-profit counterparts could never attract. I've seen people go to work for nonprofits because there's a social benefit, a social cause, a purpose, something kind of redeeming, something valuable to society that they're bringing that many for-profits don't have to offer. And they can attract people at a lower price point that will bring their tremendous experience and energy and all of that. I work with a nonprofit where the COO is the former, I don't know how much I should say, he's the former head of operations, we'll just say, for a very large drugstore, corner drugstore chain. We'll just put it like that.
Sure.
I mean, he's in a nonprofit. He's a COO in a nonprofit. He brings tremendous resources, experience, networks, things like that. So I think a lot of nonprofits could take advantage of more of that if they led with the social purpose that they exist to accomplish. And I think there are a lot of mid-career people that are going like, I'm ready to do something for a while that has a social benefit, not just a financial one.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's really an interesting perspective because it makes me think of the VTO tool from EOS, where nonprofits might hit the nail on the head for their mission purpose.
It's some of the easiest part of the work that I do with my nonprofit clients. When I get to core focus, oh yeah, we already know it. When I talk about core values, oh yeah, no, they got values, they've got
Yeah,
focus, they've already figured a lot of that out. And my for-profit clients at times look at me like,
you've got three heads.
yeah, why? To make money? Like, yeah, no, I think there's got to be something that kind of transcends the money, like, isn't there? And sometimes they really struggle to figure that out.
It sounds like both industries could learn from the
It
gaps in the
could.
other,
You're exactly
right?
right. No,
Because
you're exactly right.
some of the most money driven organizations I've helped as a fractional CMO have no issue
Mhm.
with their scorecard and hitting their numbers and hitting their rocks when it comes to getting stuff done and becoming more profitable. But then they might have a churn rate of 33% of their staff turns over every quarter because they're
Right.
just burning them out and cracking the whip. And it's like, well, people don't really buy into the vision. They don't feel appreciated. Whereas I'm assuming potentially for nonprofits, the commonality could be, hey, they've got great churn, they've got great employee retention, and people love them. It's just maybe getting stuff done and
Exactly
solving
right.
solving for the other half of the equation on each would probably do them a tremendous value.
You said it really well. I see those two sides coming together. There's a world called impact investing that some of your listeners may want to kind of tune into. Impact investing is growing like crazy. And the idea of impact investing is that we invest in an organization and we're expecting some kind of a social and a financial return.
Uh-huh.
So, an impact investing on one end of the spectrum is philanthropy, where we only expect a social return. The other end is traditional investing, where we're only expecting a financial return. Everything else in between is impact investing. And when we do an impact investment, we're expecting some kind of financial return, maybe not as great as a traditional market investment, but we're also expecting some kind of a social return. And we can realize both. And I think a lot of what EOS does is help a lot of for-profit companies think through, is there kind of a social benefit that we're bringing to our employees or to society or to the clients that we work with? Something beyond just we provide a product or a service at a price point.
Kurt, it makes me think of a story. I'm from an area of the country that very prevalent when it comes to chocolate. Okay. One of the major players in chocolate. We also have Mars factories. We also have Cargill as a big place with Wilbur chocolate brand, and then there's other factories around here that are just all in on chocolate. There's a brand that's become an emerging competitor of them, and it actually came from a YouTuber named Mr. Beast. Jimmy is his first name. He
Okay.
created a chocolate bar called Feastables. This is a $1 billion brand now. He leveraged from his
Wow.
YouTube following, but
Wow.
his whole shtick is for profit, but they're not using any child labor. They're sourcing
You bet.
ethically,
You bet.
and they're still turning a profit, but they're
Yep.
doing it off of this mission. And it's just like he said in an interview that one of his goals is to show these larger players that you can still be profitable, and I can still beat you by doing the right thing. And I think that's just one example of what you're talking about.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. People dismiss the benefit of having ethical standards, of having values, a sense of purpose to the work they do, and the benefit that that can be to attracting talent and retaining that talent, charging a marketable rate for what it is that he's selling. He probably charges a little bit more for it. And people are going like, you know what? I buy that chocolate for reasons beyond just how it tastes. I buy it because I know where it came from. I trust where it came from. And I think, we're in a society where people care about those things. So
Yeah, you mentioned earlier about your agency and your services background and how sometimes you have you may use the example of like a dozen clients, they all feel like they own a part of your time, and it's just really tough to be in that background.
Yeah.
I've with my experience in agencies, both starting and operating one as well as being part of the leadership of them, I've found that one of the unique challenges for these service-based businesses along the same line of thinking is that they're they're almost of the same mindset where they want to manage the relationship with the client and they don't put up with any of that "you're my boss" kind of thing. They're like, this is the deliverable, we're hardlining, we're not going to go over scope ever, and if you don't like it, tough luck. And then they really browbeat and watch the billable hours of employees to make sure that they're utilized at a certain rate. And it's like it's very tough, right? That the nature of agency work is tough. So it's like high standard there, and I find that to be, hitting the scorecard, hitting the rocks, same problem. But then commoditizing almost like a manufacturing Lean Six Sigma type process. And then I found an agency on the other hand that will just bend over backwards and do whatever the client wants. And it's like, oh, I'm glad that you're my boss. Like, employees, you're all salary, you're all working 60 plus hours a week, and this is, no time for anything else. I find that one of the things I've been seeing is sort of the middle ground of the two models, where the partnership is more of a partnership than like an employee relation or just a commodity,
Mhm.
and that you can charge a premium price, you can give a premium service deliverable, but you don't need as many of the clients because they stay for a longer period. And I found that new way of doing an agency, at least for marketing, and it might be the same for other types of service businesses,
Yeah.
has been a bit more sustainable. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on how the agency industry could potentially take these lessons and grow?
Yeah. Uh, I did not do a lot of time and material agency work. Most of my work were retained services, and the nature of retained services is a little bit of I think you need to be at this level of retainer because what you're asking for is requiring generally this level of work and those kinds of things.
Right.
And figuring that out, and then always wanting to under promise and over deliver as a part of it was just always a component of it. But one of the reasons that I was in an agency serving nonprofits is because in a way we got to borrow the purpose of all the nonprofits that we served, gave us a sense of that same purpose. We're an extension of what you're doing, we believe in what you're doing, and that gives meaning to our team and the work that we're doing on behalf of you guys.
Yeah, I think that's a really important part when people are trying to find their core audience, their target market,
Yeah.
right? Just going tactical on EOS, it's like not just who you want to serve and not just who wants you to help them, but where are there synergies that may be harder to quantify from a financial or purpose, that confluence, that in between point. One such example I can share with you is I really enjoy working with companies that run on EOS. Part of the reason why I'm doing this whole season of the podcast talking about EOS implementers because I want to dive into that. A couple of reasons why. One, if they work with an EOS implementer, they're more likely to value the relationship of a trusted advisor or a fractional type member of their org.
Yeah.
So they really get more of a benefit from the open mindedness there. Two, I run my business on EOS, and the way that I do leadership with tracking scorecards and rocks and measurables is straight out of there. So if we speak the same language, even better. And number three, the mindset of people that commit to EOS is that of they want to live the EOS life. So it's, they want growth, they want to make an impact, they want to do work with people they like. And the way that they, not only people like me, but people on their team and their customers, is we analyze people and relationships in a similar way. So I think that's an interesting thing where you pointed out where agencies working with nonprofits fill their own purpose gap by the clients they serve. I think, I mean, man, you got my wheels turning. I think that any business, if they can fill a gap, whether that's from a financial or a purpose, just by serving the right client, you just solve you bundle a lot of problems in one, and you just knock over that one domino, you solve a bunch at one time.
There's a load of opportunity there. There's just a load. I mean, we talk if you're going out and you're finding, fractional leaders on your team, which is really common in the EOS world, right? Somebody that's a fractional CFO, fractional HR leader, a fractional sales or fractional marketing person, those kinds of things. I mean, how about leading with the sense of purpose that you have? Hey, by the way, here's our core focus. This is our purpose, cause, or passion. This needs to be important to you too, right? I don't just need your product or your service here as a fractional leader. I need you to buy into what we're trying to accomplish in our work. Again, it's borrowing from the nonprofit world and saying, how could we bring some of those values over here and create a synergy between us that will have you working overtime in the work that you do for us because there's a meaning to it beyond just providing a service.
Yeah, voluntary overtime is the
Yeah,
key thing.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah,
So
interesting.
interesting. So
Yeah.
when we're talking about leadership, I like this topic especially with you because you've seen so many different leadership structures and been a part of leadership across the board. Can you tell me in your own words what are some of the things that leaders may have a misconception on when it comes to developing that skill? Like what are
Mm,
some of the skills that maybe most commonly underdeveloped and need to be worked on or that
mm,
are missing altogether?
yeah. The power of their voice is one thing that comes to mind. Why do we have to work so hard at helping leaders understand the importance of repetition and communication? And I think for leaders that are humble, they just see themselves as another person on the chain gang, if you will, right? I'm just
Mhm.
I'm just another guy that's here and trying to help out, and I have a unique role, but does it make me any better than anybody else? Well, that may be true, but you happen to have a megaphone attached to your mouth. So that every time you open it, it comes out loud and it's really important what you say and the steering and direction and focus that that gives the team. So I think that's one thing. In fact, let me tell you a quick story. I was in with the team the other day, and we were going through their rocks and evaluating the last quarter, right? Which is what we do every quarter. How do we get a little bit better? And that team had completed 40% of their company rocks and 50% of their total rocks. And I said, "What's our goal?" 80%. How long have we been
Halfway
working
there.
together? We've been working together for a year. Well, they said, we don't think, you don't give us credit for rocks that we made progress on, but, we just didn't get it over the finish line. But if you considered the progress that we made on all these rocks that you just said, no, it didn't get done, so we get a zero in effect for it. We think you'd be a lot better. And I said, so let me ask you this. Let's say you're writing up a piece of code and you haven't launched it yet. What difference did that make to your business? None. Yep, zero. Somebody else said, well, I'd like to see the research on 80%. Where did 80% come from? I said, 200,000 sessions across 26,000 businesses. There's your research.
That's a lot. It's quite a bit of a sample size.
Yeah, quite a bit of samples. I said,
Yeah.
okay, you tell me, what do you think the percentage should be? What do you think the goal should be? And the guy sitting next to me said, well, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be 40 or 50%. And at that point, the CEO spoke up and he said, this is why I brought EOS into this business. We struggle to get things done here. We need to get things over the finish line. So he used his voice in that moment. He'd allowed all of that kerfuffle to go on, right, with the team, allowing us to kind of sort it, think it out. And then, really, in an important moment, he kind of summarized it, brought it all together, and said, we have to get things done. He turned to the head of IT. We really need that program. We really need that app finished. We need that finished this next quarter. We've got to get that delivered. And all of the excuses and all the rationales kind of went away. And everybody, I think, in that moment recommitted themselves to saying, I'm not just going to work on stuff, I'm going to get it done. So I just think it's a great example of, a leader using his voice and the power of his position to coalesce a team around a very, very important reality of something that they were missing and something they need to do a better job of. Super proud of him. Super proud of the team at the end of the day, saying, you know what? It's not 40 or 50%. These are excuses that we're making for, areas that we're not really delivering on, and we just need to do a better job of that.
What they lacked in getting those rocks done in that quarter, they gained in that leader stepping up and coming to the next level to right the ship, right? Because it's like either a lesson or a win. If you have that growth mindset that like you can't, if you do the best that you can, you either learn or you win, and those are the only outcomes. I think if you have that right mindset. But that leader displayed in a few words, and I think one thing you said was incredibly important that needs to be touched on is he let the kerfuffle, he let everyone get it all out there, speak their mind,
Yep.
and then with a couple of sentences, just put a pin on it and dotted it and said, all right, this is it. Because one, they have more commitment and trust because they were able to be open and honest and speak through their what they thought. And two, he wasn't like politicking from a soapbox and taking 80% of all the talk time. No, he had said just the most important message. That's a great story.
I think it's great. Yeah, it's a great point. I tell my clients all the time, yeah, you set a lot of rocks, and they're going like, maybe we have too many. And I said, well, we're either going to get a lot done or we're going to learn a whole lot of things.
Mm.
At the end of this, we're going to either learn a whole bunch about how we need to set rocks in a better way, make them more realistic, and all of that, or we're gonna get a whole bunch of stuff done. We're going to learn about our capacity as a team. I think there's another thing that leaders bring to teams that I think is often underplayed. That's courage.
How do you define courage?
Yeah. I think it's a willingness to do something extraordinary. I
Okay.
think it's a willingness to do what most other people won't do. And I think the CEO in particular is a position where they say, you know what, we wouldn't normally do this, but in this situation, we're going to. In one statement, in one sentence, in one moment, they have the power to commit the resources and the focus, time, energy, all of that of the team around an initiative or around something that is a really important thing, to take a risk they wouldn't normally take, those kinds of things. So I think the CEO is a position of courage and a place where that courage can be demonstrated. Elon Musk, regardless of what you think of him, certainly lots of different opinions about his leadership
Complicated
style and
guy.
all that. Complicated guy, but you read Walter Isaacson's bio on him, and you hear him talk about surges. And again, you will kill a team if you're doing surges all the time. But Elon Musk knows how to help a team discover what their true potential and true capacity is. When he says, no, we're not going to take 8 months to move that data center, we're going to move it in the next 2 weeks. And he'll come back at the end of that and go, and so there's courage that is a part of that. There's craziness that's a part of that. But at the end of the day, it's more important that he helps the team discover what they have a capacity to do than to kind of float their way there. And that those kinds of commitments of courage, I think are just incredibly inspiring.
I also think to that point, it's probably a difficult or learned skill from an implementer from your perspective on how to guide these leadership teams to set the right rocks and scorecards. Because
Yeah.
on one hand, you might that group you had that only hit 40%, you might have another client and they hit 100% of their rocks, but they're still falling short of their scorecard. And it's like you have to have the courage to do new things that actually matter, that are above and beyond what you think, because you can hit 100% of your rocks all the time, but like the goal is 80, right? Goals on 100. If you're always hitting 100, something's happening.
It
Maybe
is.
you're not brave enough.
And I tell teams that. I said, hey, listen, we're talking about a whole bunch of stuff because you hit 40 or 50% of your rocks. We'd be talking about a different set of issues if you were hitting 100% of your rocks. I'd be saying, you guys sloughing off? Are you putting layups? Is that what we're doing here? No, I don't know. I don't know. I've had very high performing teams that have hit 95%, 100% of their rocks. They're extraordinary at performance, and it's long fought, and they're 4 or 5 years into EOS, and they've discovered what you need to do in order to get there. I think the secret, or what kind of sits underneath all of this, Ross, is that we cannot turn EOS or any other operating system into a system of checkboxes.
Correct. There's nuance.
Why are we setting these rocks in the first place? What is this really all about? We're trying to get a job done at the end of the day. We're trying to make the invisible visible. We're trying to call out our work and put that in front of us so we can be accountable to it and all of that. It is not about checking boxes. It's not about just feeling good at the end of a quarter. My teams learn really quickly, whether they hit 90% of their rocks or they hit 40% of their rocks, the feel-good moment of hitting 90% is going to be fleeting, because I'm going to quickly ask, but what do we still learn from this last quarter?
Right.
What can we still do better on, right? And so, yeah, it's all about learning and getting a little bit better every quarter, I think. And you got to bring it back to, what is it we're really trying to do here? And it's not check boxes and feel good about stuff. It's about getting a big job done and accomplishing a vision, you know.
I'm fired up after hearing that. I'm fired up. Let me take a deep breath here and ask you the next question, which is,
Yeah, yeah.
how do you go about tough conversations?
Yeah,
Maybe you have a client that they
yeah.
on paper check all the boxes. They're just a great client for you, the right industry. They tell you all the things you want to hear. They're the right fit for size and things like that. They could really benefit from EOS. But then you go through one of the team building sessions of the trust, or the Lencioni's, pyramid, right? Where it all starts with trust. And you feel like things start to fall apart, where they might not have that culture of open and honest. And although they're getting results, it's like a happy accident type culture, right? How do you then do that? What I call radical candor. Thanks, Kim Scott, for writing a wonderful book, where you care so much, and then you have that tact to then confront directly at the same time. Like, tell me how you train that muscle.
Um, well, what makes tough conversations tough, right, is that it involves people, and we want to do work we love with people we love. And so it inevitably involves people that are a part of that equation. So there are a couple of things that I use to usher my clients into that. Number one, I'm going to challenge them to take the high road, to do the hard thing. I don't like low roads, easy roads, layups. I'm going to challenge them to do the difficult thing, to make the difficult decision. I know they'll be happier in the long run if they'll do it. So that's one thing. And I would say, in principle, a lot of leaders ought to be ready to say, what does it look like to invite my team to take the high road here? Team, we could do the easy thing. We could lay 3 people off and not give them any severance, but I'm actually going to ask the question, what does the high road look like here? And I find people are really inspired by the high road, much more so than the low road. So that would be one thing. I think the second thing that I have found really helpful is to say to teams, when we're talking about people issues, we got an RPRS issue, is what we call it in the US, right? We don't have the right person, or they're not in the right seat. We realize there's only 4 things we can do in response to an RPRS issue. There's only 4 things. Coach them, move them if it's a wrong seat issue, terminate them, or tolerate them.
Mm.
And I said, I don't have a problem with toleration. I don't have a problem with tolerating somebody in a seat if it's your decision.
Right. But they better not be an issue on the next quarterly or then the one after that.
Right. We're not going to tolerate them because we didn't do one of the first 3.
Mm.
We'll tolerate them because this person's retiring in 3 months, and it doesn't make sense to terminate them here 3 months before they
Right.
retire.
High road right there.
It's a decision, and listen, we'll put up with this. We're here for the long run. 3 months is not going to ultimately make a difference in this. It'll make a big difference in the morale of our team, and certainly his experience in transitioning into retirement or whatever that is. So those kinds of things. It's a high road kind of a decision. But I find by clarifying there are really only 4 things that we can do, that helps people go like, okay, one of only 4 things. What is my decision? So the first challenge that I give them is I want you to show up at each of our quarterlies. And did you ever watch that old show on television, Biggest Loser? Biggest Loser. It was
Yeah,
about
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it was about losing weight. And what do they say? Know your number.
Mm.
Know your number. At the end of the day, if you'll know your number, then we're clear on the job that's in front of us. So I say to my teams all the time, know your number. And what I mean by that is how many RPRS issues do you have in your downstream?
Mm.
Know your number. Come up, because if you'll know your number, then I know you use your people analyzer to evaluate, do I have all the right people? And are they in all the right seats? Do I have any empty seats? Those kinds of things. And that tells me how many RPRS issues I have. Know your number. I've got 5 issues. I went around the table the other day and I said, how many RPRS issues do you have? I got 5 issues. How many do you have? I got 2 issues. How many do you have? I have 2 issues. I said, okay, what are you going to do about those 5? And he goes, well, could we put them on the board? How many of them are open positions? How many are wrong people issues? How many are wrong seat issues? That kind of a thing. And that helps us sometimes evaluate, okay, for the 3 open positions, 3 of the 5 are open positions. What are we doing to recruit, to post positions, all those kinds of things. And so anyway, it's just kind of going around like that. If you know your number, at least we have a starting point to know, okay, I need to solve 3 of these 5 RPRS issues this next quarter. And I said, if we do not prioritize your RPRS issues, we will never, ever get to 100% RPRS. And Ross, I've been working for 40 years in my career, okay? 40 years, and I've worked in only one situation that was 100% RPRS.
I, you know what? Part of me wants to say I'm surprised and shocked, but the other part of me is just confirmation bias that I feel like it's the universal toughest thing to solve for any business, no matter what size, scale, industry, what have you. And you just basically, with your anecdote, kind of confirmed what I believed, which is that it is the most important and it is the most prevalent across whatever field it is that you're in.
Most important rocks we can set each quarter. How many RPRS issues am I going to solve? What
Man,
RPRS issues am I going to solve? I like asking my clients, what's the next big transformational people decision we need to make this quarter?
I'm going to get really tactical on this. I'm a burning
Okay.
question. I think you'll have a good answer. If if I feel like, so I've been a part of, call it 24 organizations with EOS, done offsites and whatnot. Some organizations will have 30 issues on the whiteboard when we're going, getting ready for the issue processing part. Some will have 130, which is insane. But what I've found is that there are sometimes people that pass the people analyzer, they don't put up any issues. And that could even be in the L10, right? You could have a small department, 3 or 4 members, and like all the issues come from 3 people and one person doesn't put up any. How do you go about calling that out with candor and leadership? And how can leaders go about and try and get the issues out to get either further engagement, or is that part of the people analyzer that they don't GWC because they can't bring up issues? Like, how do you address that unique tactical problem?
Yeah, at the risk of being confusing, I'm going to go to Pat Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team and to say our starting point there is we have to create an environment where we can trust each other. If we don't have that, we're not going to speak into questions like that. I'm not going to challenge you. And, you say you've got no RPRS issues, but how many times have you brought up Sandy's name in the last month?
Mm.
Is that Sandy an RPRS issue here? And if we don't have a trusting environment, we're not going to have those kinds of conversations. So I go to what's sitting at the core is not RPRS issues, it's trust issues amongst the leadership team. And to solve those things, We got to engage in activities like the one thing exercise, where we're going to go around the table and we're going to share one thing we most admire. And then we're going to around the table, we're going to share one thing that we recommend you start or stop doing that's hurting you more than helping you, right?
Mm.
Those kinds of things begin to create more trust in the environment because we're sharing hard things with each other. And we realize, number one, nobody died. Nobody died in the employment of this exercise, right? And actually, we realized sharing hard things, it actually isn't as easy, it isn't as difficult as we thought it was. Most of the time, the other person already knew it anyway. And
Mm.
second, we get experience at how we talk about these things in a way that is investment, not criticism.
Mm.
Will Guidara, in his book, I forget what it is. It was he ran the #1 restaurant in the world. It's on hospitality, incredible hospitality, something like that. Yeah, he said that when we share positive things, when we share admiration with each other, it confirms and it helps us feel good. But when we share criticism, it's investment. We have to see criticism as investment in our colleagues, not as being tearing people down. We're not gonna attack people. We're gonna attack problems.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I'm going to butcher this quote, but it's something along
Yeah,
the lines of you can't have an attitude of gratitude uh, at the same time of feeling the emotion of grief.
yeah,
So when when you reframe that visceral feeling going into it with that one thing, and you start with what I admire about you, what I'm grateful for, it might take the pressure off of the person receiving the feedback of, oh no, like they're braced for defensiveness.
yeah.
And it's really deep because like you said, humans are humans are humans, and everyone has emotions that are complicated. But if we're in an emotional mindset that's that of gratitude and positivity and courage,
Affirmation. It's
yeah,
very affirming. It's very affirming. It says, "Boy, I'm seen here. People understand this is a strength that I have. This is appreciated and valued here, and all of that." And I think it provides a great context for being able to go back and to say, okay, given that, that's great. That's a great thing. Here's something I think you could start or stop that's probably hurting you more than it's helping you. Ross, I went through that exercise with a team of 14, 15 people once. It was a huge leadership team, and they shared some feedback with me that was a blind spot, and that was a really, really helpful thing. And I thought, well, that's not, when I'm that way, that's not helpful to the team. I don't want to be that way. It's not my intention to kind of come across like that. And so it was just really good feedback where I had a chance to go, like, I'm gonna be careful about that in the future. I don't want to communicate something that, isn't helpful to the relationships that I have. So I share that with them. I say, hey, here was my experience in this process, right? We all have something we can learn and grow from and all of that. So I think that it's a long answer to the question. We got to get back to, what does it take to create a trusting environment? And in that trusting environment, it creates an environment in which we can speak into other people's situation, maybe blind spots that they have. I think you're taking it easy on Sandy because you really like her. And I understand why you like her.
mm,
She's a charismatic person. She's a likable individual. But at the end of the day, Sandy has a big job to do, and I'm not sure it's getting done. And we got to be honest about that. I had a CEO ask one of his lieutenants, it was the head of operations, it was a few months ago. He said, why aren't you delegating? And the head of operations, like 6 people reporting to us, said, I'm not real sure. And I said, okay, let's put the people analyzer up on the wall. We put the 6 people that he reports to on that. We did the people analyzer. Do they reflect these values? Do they GWC their job? Do they get it? Do they want it? Do they have the capacity for it, right? Values, are they the right people? GWC, are they in the right seat? And what he realized is 3 of his people weren't the right people, and 3 of his people weren't in the right seat. And that's why he wasn't delegating. We say we really should only delegate to people who are 100% RPRS. They are the right
right.
person, and they're in the right seat. They have capacity. We need to give them more stuff. And so that then he knew his number, And now it's an opportunity for him to ask the question, so what transformational people decision am I going to make this next quarter to address my 6 RPRS issues so that I can begin doing the job of delegation, which is ultimately the thing that's holding me back. So all these things kind of interact with each other. It's part of what I love about the operating system. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to ask you another question that's not necessarily about leadership, but it is about communicating uniqueness in order to be, understood. I have to ask you about your chili peppers becoming a marketing tool. Hard left turn.
That is a hard left. So I'm a pepperhead. All right. I love Red Hot Chili Peppers, and I'm not referring to the band.
Californication.
I love, yeah,
You
there
spent
you
some time
go.
there.
Yeah, I know. No, I love spicy food. I literally travel with chili powder that I make myself. And so I've had a chance to share that from time to time with clients. And I put a little stupid label on the front. I call it Curt's chili powder. It's all it is, right? And I give it to a friend, and he says to me the other day, every time I pull my bottle of chili powder out and put it on a steak or a piece of seafood or on a salad or on a pizza or whatever, he goes, "There's your name, sitting right there in front of me. And it reminds me of you." And he goes, "That's a brilliant marketing idea." And I never thought of it that way. That wasn't why I did it. I did it to share something that I love with my clients. It's just a way to share something that I enjoy, my chili peppers, my smoker, put it all together. You get some great tasting chili powder that you can put on a lot of different food. But what I realized in the long run is it becomes a marketing tool to give that out and be a reminder to them that I'm in their life, that we get to
My
enjoy
goodness.
something together. Isn't that crazy?
As someone who's dedicated the majority of their career so far to marketing,
Yeah.
I have to tip my hat. That is genius because there's a couple of reasons why. Number one, the goal of branding is to make an impression and to be remembered, right?
Right,
And
right,
marketing, you can say what you want, marketing and branding closely related, but branding specifically to be remembered and to make an impression.
right.
And then one of the hardest things that I have to try and convey to hyper analytical spreadsheet type clients, right, is your numbers and your pro forma and your sensitivity analysis does not take in consideration how that makes your prospect feel. And they're
Yeah,
usually like, "What? You're not impressed by yourself?" And I was like, "No,
yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's impressive.
Okay.
Great, it's fine. But how do you make them feel? Do they get excited? Do they
Um,
dread an interaction with your brand or your company? Do they feel at ease and comfortable? Curt, your customers are going to know that when they work with you, you're going to punch them in the mouth, whether that's with chili peppers or with the truth from
that's right.
a caring
That's
place.
that's right.
But you know what? Like we've probably talked about before, sometimes it's not the novelist that gets remembered; it's the poet.
Yeah.
It's the person with a short, impactful message. And if you can really tantalize the senses, whether that's a smell or a feel, whatever. I mean, you nailed it, man. I'm glad I asked you that question.
It's a great way to put it. And I have them come back and they'll say, "Can I buy the chili powder from you?" And I say, "Nope, nope. As soon as I sell it, it turns it into a business, and this isn't a business to me.
Right.
This is a hobby. This is something I love. I give this to you because I can and I want to. I love you and I care for you. And this is something we enjoy together." And like they'll remember that all day, every day. So I'll bring chili powder to my clients. I'll bring beef jerky that I make
Mm.
that's spiced with the chili powder. And these are just things that they remember, and it just kind of leaves a lasting taste in their mouth, if you will, right? From our interaction. That our interaction is here, that it's fun. I say I want to bring fun back into the workplace. I want work to be fun again. I want work to be fun again. And we can make it fun again. If we can get to 100% RPRS, we can enjoy some fun tasting stuff along the way. We can punch each other in the mouth and know that it's not personal. That at the end of the day, I care deeply. I've cried with my clients because I've cared so deeply about what they're doing, and I care deeply about their mission, their cause, what they're trying to pull off, and I care deeply that they be great at what they do. And they know that. that at the end of the day, this is about helping them to be great. Let's set great plans and let's execute great plans. And I love
And
that
have
work more
fun
than
while doing
anything.
it,
And
right?
have fun doing it. We're going to have a lot more fun when we start consistently executing than we are when we just time after time just realize, no, this is just not going anywhere.
Wow. Well, for everyone listening, just remember that people will forget what you say or did, but not how they made you feel.
Yeah,
And if you work with Curt, you better have an appetite for spice because you're going to get
that's
it
right.
one way or
That's
another.
right. We're going to bring it out. I travel with it, man. I would show you my bottle of chili powder, but I gave it away to my client yesterday.
Hey,
And you know why? She said, I'm all out.
can't have that.
I use it on everything. She said, I can't believe it. In like 4 months, I ran out of it. And I said, there you go. Take that.
Curt, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Where can people find you? Where can they get in touch?
Yeah, EOS Worldwide .com/Curt CURT dash Swindoll SWINDOLL. That's me. I'm in the DFW area. I travel some. I've worked with clients virtually. I've worked kind of all over the country. I've got clients in Chicago and Colorado Springs and Fresno, California, and Southern California. I've had them down in Houston, kind of all over the place. And I'm having the time of my life doing it. So I'd love to talk to them about what EOS can do for them and how we can make work fun again. So
Awesome. Well, thank you,
me.
Curt, for joining the show.
You're
And
welcome.
for everyone listening, I hope that you took some of these stories and some of these lessons and can apply them to your life. Because here's the thing, you can get what you want out of life. You can have fun while doing it. And maybe, just maybe, think about how your personal brand makes other people feel, whether that's spicy or not.
It's great. It's great. Love it.
Thank you, everyone. Curt, thank you. Everyone, be well.